I'll never forget that afternoon up on the mountain, because it started like any other quiet day at the cabin and turned into one of the strangest battles I've ever had on my own land. I was stacking wood near the gate, minding my business, when I saw her, Linda. She came marching up the dirt road like she owned the whole ridge, a stack of papers clutched in one hand, sunglasses perched on her face, chin lifted like she was leading a parade. And before she even reached the gate, she was already talking loud. "This cabin is reserved for my family reunion. 100 guests are on their way tonight." I almost dropped the log I was holding because I thought she was joking, but when I looked closer, that smug little smile told me she was dead serious. "You have to understand, this cabin wasn't just some weekend rental, it was mine. I'd worked for years, saved every penny, and finally bought it outright. Every acre of those 5 acres tucked into the hillside. To have somebody strut up and announce it was theirs like I was squatting on my own porch, well, that kind of arrogance hits you in the gut." I leaned against the gate, trying to keep my voice even. "Ma'am, this land is private. My land. Whatever papers you've got there don't mean a thing." But she didn't flinch. She shoved them closer to my face like I was a waiter and she was handing me a check. "Don't play games. The HOA gave me permission. You'll need to move your stuff out." Now I'd had my share of run-ins with the local HOA. They'd tried for years to push their control up the mountain, threatening fines, sending letters, acting like they owned more than they really did. But legally, they had no claim up where I was, and I knew that. So I stayed calm, maybe calmer than I felt, and said, "You've got no authority here." But of course, Linda wasn't interested in facts. She already had her phone out. "Fine," she snapped. "If you won't cooperate, I'll call the sheriff myself." And with that, she punched the number in, lifted the phone to her ear, and gave me that smirk people wear when they think they've already won. I almost laughed, because I knew the sheriff, knew him well. In fact, I'd served alongside half his deputies back in the service, trained with them, sweated with them, trusted them. She had no idea who she was calling down on me. She paced in front of the gate, speaking loud enough for the whole forest to hear. "Yes, officer, I need immediate assistance. There's a trespasser refusing to leave the cabin I rented." Then, she looked right at me, eyebrows raised like she was savoring the moment. My stomach tightened, not because I was worried about being in trouble, but because I already knew this was about to blow up in her face in a way she wasn't ready for. Minutes later, the sound of engines groaning up the gravel road reached us, and soon 2 squad cars pulled into view, lights flashing in the afternoon sun. Linda actually waved both arms like she was flagging a plane. "Over here, arrest him," she hollered. She pointed at me like I was some wild animal, her voice cracking as she tried to fake cry, pulling tissues from her bag as if she'd rehearsed the scene in her head. The officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts. One of them, Miller, looked right at me. His eyes narrowed, then slowly a grin spread across his face. He walked straight over, stopped in front of me, and extended his hand. "Good to see you again, Captain." His voice carried a weight Linda clearly wasn't expecting. Her fake tears dried up instantly. "Captain?" she stuttered, glancing between us like she'd just stepped into the wrong play. I shook Miller's hand and smirked. "Yeah, funny thing. Half these deputies here, I trained them back when I wore the uniform. And you just tried to call them on me." For the first time, I saw doubt flash across her face, but she wasn't the type to back down. She stomped her heel in the dirt, shoved the papers at Miller, and barked, "I don't care who he trained. This cabin was promised to me. The HOA gave me these documents. That means it's mine for the weekend." Miller took the pages, scanned them for 2 seconds, then let out a chuckle. "Ma'am, this isn't official. It's just a flyer from the HOA newsletter. You can't wave a flyer around and claim someone else's property." He handed it back, but Linda snatched it, glaring, like he'd betrayed her. "You're supposed to be on my side. I pay HOA dues. I fund this community." I leaned casually against the gate, arms crossed, and added, "Funny thing, Linda. This cabin isn't even under the HOA's control. They've been trying to rope me in for years. but they've never had a single legal claim up here. Her eyes darted between us, and I could see panic rising behind the mask, but instead of stopping, she doubled down. Fine. If the HOA doesn't own it, then the county does. I'll have the sheriff evict you tomorrow morning. Miller's smile faded, and he stepped in close, lowering his voice. Ma'am, the sheriff you're talking about? He reports to him. And he pointed right at me. Linda actually stumbled backward, clutching her papers like they might shield her from the truth. But again, instead of walking away, she muttered under her breath, "If the real cops won't help me, I'll bring my own." And she stormed off. Toward the road, phone pressed tight to her ear. We could hear her shouting, "Yeah, it's me, bring the trucks. Don't ask questions, just get here now." When she hung up, she spun around with that same smug smile, though her hands were trembling. "You think you're safe because you've got friends in uniform? Just wait. I've got people too." Miller raised an eyebrow at me. She didn't. "Just say that, did she?" I nodded slowly. "Oh, she did, and this is about to get ugly." About 15 minutes later, the roar of engines broke the mountain quiet again. 2 black SUVs came screeching to a stop, dust swirling in the air. 4 men piled out, heavy-set, wearing matching polos, the kind of hired muscle you pick up cheap. They weren't cops, but they carried batons and radios and an overconfidence that made them dangerous. Linda threw her arms wide like a queen greeting her knights. "Boys, remove the squatter and open the cabin. My guest will be here any minute." One of the men cracked his knuckles. "You heard the lady." Miller stepped forward, flashing his badge. "Don't even think about it. This is private land. You set 1 foot past that gate and you'll be arrested." But the biggest of the 4 sneered, shoved his chest out, and said, "Our orders come from her, not you." Linda clapped her hands together, practically giddy. "That's right. Now get him out before I start charging fines for obstruction." I took a slow step up to the gate, let my voice drop into a tone that cut through the tension like glass. "Last chance. Walk away. Because the second you cross this line, everything changes." The men hesitated, glancing at one another, but then one of them grabbed the gate. That's when I pulled out the folder I'd been keeping for just this kind of nonsense. Inside were deeds, maps, and most importantly, a stamped court order. I opened it, held up the first page, the paper catching the breeze but carrying more weight than any weapon. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is the ruling from county court. It proves this cabin, this road, and the 5 acres around it are mine. The HOA has 0 authority here. In fact," I flipped to the next page and lifted it high so the goons could see, "they've already been fined before for trying this exact scam." Linda's face wavered, but she tried to laugh it off. That paper could be fake. Miller took the document from my hand, looked it over carefully, then nodded. "It's real. I was in that courtroom when this was signed. And if you cross that gate now, you'll be charged with trespassing, assault, and impersonating officers." The 4 men shifted uncomfortably. One of them muttered, "Karen, you didn't tell us he had court papers." But Linda wasn't letting go. She screeched, "Don't listen to him. He forged those documents. I'm the rightful tenant here. The HOA promised me." She pulled another sheet from her bag, waving it wildly. I snatched it out of her hand. A cheap printout from Microsoft. Word bold letters across the top. "Cabin reserved, HOA special event." No seals, no signatures, nothing official. I held it up, laughed, and dropped it at her feet. "This isn't a contract, it's a flyer, and flyers don't beat the law." Her face twisted crimson, her voice rising into a scream. "You'll regret this. You think a piece of paper scares me?" But just then, the rumble of more engines echoed up the road. Only this time, it wasn't unmarked SUVs. It was county trucks. And the man who stepped out first was Sheriff Grant himself. The second his boots hit the gravel, the place went quiet. He had the kind of presence that makes people stand straighter without realizing it. Weathered face, broad shoulders, hat pulled. "Hello?" He looked at Linda, then at me, and asked simply, "What's going on here?" Linda ran toward him like a desperate child. "Sheriff, thank God you're here. This man broke into my cabin. He's violent. He threatened me, refused to leave." She piled lie on top of lie, fake sobs punctuating her story. The sheriff just stood there, letting the silence grow thick around her until she started to squirm. Then he turned to me. "You got papers?" Without a word, I handed him the court order. He studied it for a long moment, then gave one slow nod. "Looks official to me." Linda's mouth fell open. "What? No, that can't be." But he raised his voice over her protests. "Ma'am, do you know the penalty for filing a false report?" She blinked rapidly, shaking her head. He didn't wait for an answer. "And do you know what happens when you hire unlicensed security to trespass on private land?" He gestured at her 4 hired men, who by then were already inching backward, toward their SUVs, their bravado gone. In that moment, the whole charade, Kala,